Hello, thanks for having me. It's really an honor to be invited to Creative Mornings, and thanks to Sealy Pines for the invite. I'm going to be just taking you through 30 minutes of my life story, basically, as a photographer and a commercial fisherman, and kind of talk about how my childhood really led to what I'm doing today. A lot of my influences from my father and whatnot brought me to where I am today. I run a wild salmon set net operation in Bristol Bay during June and July. I've been commercial fishing since 1995 when I was going to art school. And I've been photographing since I was maybe 10 years old. So I'll just start to take you through my childhood. My dad was, I grew up in Vista, California, which is in the suburbs of San Diego. And my dad was a nurseryman. He grew tropical plants and avocados. And on the weekends, he worked quite a lot. So on the weekends, we would escape. And he had a 21-foot boat. We were out fishing almost every weekend. It was just what we did since I was 2 years old. There's a massive, he was also really into photography, and he was photographing every single thing we caught, including a lot of sharks. And sadly, in the 80s, shark fishing was a little more popular than it is today. But and this is also sort of a chronicle of my fashion throughout life. So this is my dad. He was crazy about fishing. It's me and my dad tuna fishing. So we were in all these shark tournaments. We were eating them. It wasn't just for fun. And then things kind of changed in my life. My sister started dating this punk rock guy. I grew up in a quite conservative family, Christian conservative family. And my sister started dating this full-on punk guy. And he was this huge influence on me. And I very quickly looked like this. So from that to this. And that continued. I was in middle school, and I was listening to punk rock, and all my friends were just kind of like, what is this, you know? And I was trying to be so cool. And then it kind of petered out until high school, and it came back again. But more of those sharks. And then probably when I was 14 or so, I'm probably 17 here, but my dad and I started going to Alaska on fishing vacations, basically, in the summer for like 2 weeks or so. And I started to realize there's this whole other world in commercial fishing, and you can actually go up there and make a decent living. And I could kind of live my childhood fishing dreams. When I was a kid, I was often a fisherman for Halloween. I think 6 years in a row in elementary school, I would show up with like this huge big game fishing pole, you know. And I didn't really know, I always wanted to be a professional fisherman. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. But it sort of came full circle. And in 1995, I got a job fishing for this guy. It's a long story, but we didn't have any life jackets on board. There was no gaskets in the outboard motor. And at one time, we were sinking, and the motor was flooded and drifting away. And I survived anyway, but Alaska's a pretty wild place. And this place in Bristol Bay was really remote, and I always had really fond memories of those adventures. There's bears and crazy mosquitoes, and yeah, a lot of danger and a lot of fun. So it's probably this is obviously like 1995. So then my dad gave me a Pentax K1000 camera when I was probably 10 or 11 years old. And I started taking pictures, and I wasn't really into photography. It wasn't like a huge passion for me, but I was always encouraged by people because I wasn't chopping the heads off people. And so eventually, though, it grew on me. And in college, I started taking a lot of pictures of animals. I went to the Academy of Art College in San Francisco and decided to go for it. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with photography. I started just playing. I didn't really, I never got into it for the money or anything. I just enjoyed it, and was just kind of going with life and seeing what happens. So I got obsessed kind of with animal photography, and this, when I was a kid, I was bringing in dead sea creatures to show and tell, and it would kind of sick some people out. And then I was a huge animal lover at the same time. I had cats sleeping on my face at night and whatnot. So I thought it was really interesting, this, how we all have different perceptions on how animals are treated or our relationship to animals. So in college, a lot of my work had to do with that. And I consider humans animals also. So this is my niece with a potato that was just happened to be in a sack of potatoes we bought at the store. And then, oddly enough, my niece showed up right underneath Matt Damon's ass on the cover of Esquire about 10 years later. So these are kind of my early influences. Sally Mann, who she shot her children, and it often they looked like candid moments. They didn't look staged, but often they were staged, and that's sort of a huge influence on where my work has gone till today. I'm not purely a documentary photographer. I like to mix and match and create scenes that appear candid. Peter Beard, also a guy who spent a lot of time in Africa, just kind of documenting crocodile hunters, but also toying around with stuff. And then this is Joel Sternfeld, who really pulled back and looked a lot more at the landscape, and that was also a big influence, which carries over today. So this is my sister washing her guinea pig at home. These are two little girls I discovered on an island in Alaska that were, I walked around the corner and there's this group of kids like fighting over who could play with this dead seagull. This is my dad. He's really into wildlife photography these days. And this is my buddy Chris, whose girlfriend decorated his bedroom. So this series is sort of a place, it's sort of a Dropbox for me where I put animal situations I encounter throughout life. And it's just an ongoing series. This is a guy I met in Mexico while I was on a fishing assignment. And this is something that I've gotten a lot of letters from people that are kind of repulsed by it in some way. And then, but maybe 90% of the letters are people just out of bad relationships that are so fired up that this really like hits home with them. So this is old Greg Hennis's middle finger, actually. A lot of people just ended up sending me copycat stuff from my photos, which is always fun. So if you ever encounter swans or cats, just send them my way. And it made it on the cover of the Mercury a while back. The Fishwork Bering Sea series, after college, it was about 1999 I graduated, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with photography. I decided to start working for commercial photographers. It was in San Francisco, the dot-com boom was happening, everything was great. I was working all the time, and then suddenly 2001 and everything collapsed, and no one was working at all. And I didn't really know if I was going to pursue like fine art or commercial. And so I just decided to go back to Alaska and get a job in the winter where I could make more money. I could get a job crabbing or fishing halibut or something like that I couldn't do when I was going to school. So I went up in 2002 and I got a job on a cod boat. And that led to a job on the Rollo, which is a Bering Sea crab boat. My plan at the same time was to photograph this world and do a documentary while I was working. And I thought maybe I'd spend 2 years in each fishery and maybe create, over my lifetime, a series of images that kind of documented the state of commercial fishing around the world. But I ended up on this boat for 7 years. It was a really great, this is where we're actually fishing in Alaska, just so you know. And it's pretty brutal work. I really like physical labor, and I think it's valuable to have something other than just working as a photographer, spending a lot of time in front of the computer, editing images and whatnot. It's so nice to go out part of the year and do something physical and completely readjust your mind. And for me, fishing is perfect for that. I come home strong and refreshed, and it's a good feeling. So the feeling of accomplishment, also from being through these amazing storms. This is probably the biggest seas I've ever been in. Solid 40 foot, and occasional bigger waves. And so I just started shooting these photos, and my crew, they were really tolerant of me taking photos. The seasons were so long that really I would just shoot maybe 5 minutes a day here and there. I would run in and ask the guys if it's okay if I shot some photos, if the weather was perfectly bad enough for photos. And I would run in and grab my camera off my bunk, shoot a roll of film, and run back in and throw it down and get back out and get back to work. So it took a long time to sort of get this series together. And I have a little clip. That's me actually shooting in the back. I have a little video clip here. So these pots weigh about 800 pounds, and trying to manage them and get them over the side without crushing your fingers is kind of a challenge sometimes. It's me, yeah, disappearing in the back. It was an icy deck. And that's the shot I got when I was standing there. So at one point I decided to grab a cat from the pound just before the season. And my skipper before had a couple cats, but they'd both been taken away by eagles at the dock, unfortunately, off the back deck. So decided to be more careful this time, and got a cat. And this shot came about just before Halloween. The end of king crab season, we always have Halloween costumes on the boat because we show up in port usually right before Halloween, and so we got to be ready. So I was testing out the costume, or my buddy was testing out the costume, and the cat happened to walk by, picks it up, and that's what happened. So she was amazing. She would take turns sleeping in everyone's bunk, and it was a pretty welcome addition to the crew. But there was always those eagles looming everywhere when we pulled into port, so we'd have to lock her up inside. This guy, this is a funny story. A fish and game guy came up to our boat one year, just after I took this picture, and he had a clipboard, and he flipped it around, and it had this photo printed out from my website on it, and he was like, "Who's the man in this photo?" And we quickly gave up his name, and but he had gotten fired the year before. We didn't get along very well, so it was no problem kind of giving up his name. And it turns out it's a $1,000 fine for feeding the Steller sea lions, so I think he got away with it, though. So Matthew, one of the younger deckhands on the boat, his birthday would always fall on the third day of the opilio crab season in January. And so one year I decided to get a piñata and throw a little birthday party for him, because it's sad having your birthday when you're working a 20-hour day in the peak of the season. So I got a little clip from this, too. So he had this huge steel pipe, and it flung out of his hands, and it smacked into the crane station, the guy running the crane. So no one was injured, but that was good fun. And then this is the shot I took out of that. Meanwhile, subsequently, I was up there in 2003, and in 2004, Deadliest Catch camera crews showed up on the scene for shooting for Discovery Channel. And we ended up getting invited on the show the following year. And I think I have a few photos from that later. But anyway, once I put this, I put the crab series online, and I really didn't have grand intentions or a big marketing plan. But the photos sort of, and I was living in Norway at the time as well, and my photos started to kind of spread throughout the internet a little bit. And the pinnacle of that was probably when I got featured on fecalface.com, which, if you're not familiar, worst name in the world, but it's a art blog in San Francisco. And at the time it was, and it still is, pretty influential out there. So through that, I did this story called How to Be an Alaskan Fisherman that got syndicated all around, and images started appearing everywhere. Cover of the Stranger, the Juxtapose photo book, even an art magazine in France that took the photo off the internet and put a pixelated image on the cover without my permission. And then all sorts of things. And someone sent me this. Someone sent me this from New Zealand, and they said they recognized it as my work, took a picture of it, sent it to me, and said it was just randomly on a pole in front of their house in a small town in New Zealand. So that was pretty cool. And then it became the cover of my photo book which came out last year via Nasralli Press. So crabbing gave me the freedom, having another source of income finally gave me the freedom to have a little bit of money and I could go and explore and play. And so these shots, I was living in Norway for about 4 years. I had a Norwegian girlfriend. I was actually commuting to work in Alaska as a crabber. And I started taking photos like this while I was traveling around in the north. Just playing. It was so nice just to have the freedom to play. And these photos subsequently started getting me editorial work. People could see that I could not just shoot fishing stuff, I could shoot other stuff. I lived for a week with Sami reindeer herders in North Norway. And then I got a grant from the American Scandinavian Foundation to photograph aboard fishing boats. And this is really me stepping out of my element and actually documenting fishing in another country. So again, without really trying to get work or anything, I just kept putting what I was doing on the internet and following my own passion and not searching for money and not knowing where those paths are going to lead. But I got a random email one day from a guy running an organization called Ocean 2012, sponsored by the Pew Foundation, and they're working to fix the EU fisheries policy for the better in Europe. There's a problem with dumping of fish and overfishing and things like that. And so they basically gave me freedom and almost like a grant to spend about 2 months in 8 countries in Europe, just traveling around and finding my own way onto fishing boats. And I photographed what might be the last years of beam trawling, which is, some would say, it's the most damaging type of fishing to the ocean floor. It tears up 6 inches to a foot of the sea bottom as it goes. And I spent a week on this boat. And so my intention with these images was hopefully to make a book and have exhibitions as well. And I guess my goal in life really is to make books from these different fisheries. Not only shoot fisheries, but move on to other things as well. But right now I've been kind of rolling with the fishing thing. This is in a giant monkfish in Scotland, actually. And this is a thresher shark in France. This is the captain's little guardian on a purse seiner in Spain. And everywhere I went, he would get in front of me and start howling. And I had this in an exhibition in San Francisco, and an older woman walked up to me and really seriously was like, why is there a lamb on the boat? And so that was hard to explain, but. And I'm always spotting these animal situations that are kind of keep fitting in with my human animals thing. This was like a piece of styrofoam that there was no string or anything. It was just on the seagull. It was a beautiful seagull. It was really odd. Quarters were pretty close at times. And a lot of the fishing goes on at night, so that was a real challenge to photograph. So I ended up, I'll go through these a bit quickly. I ended up getting a call from a gallery in LA, and I had a show there, and he took my work to art fairs, and it branched out, and I got hooked up with a gallery in New York, Saratechia Roma, and they've later folded, but it was great to really get my work out there. And just kept opening more doors. This is at the Fecal Face Gallery in San Francisco. And now I'm repped by Charles Hartman Fine Art. I had my Europe show there. I had a Bering Sea show there, and I just had my latest Salmon series there as well. That's the show that just came down at Charles Hartman. And had the really great fortune to be invited to do a huge outdoor exhibition in Belgium, in a coastal town. And they took my photos, and I don't know where they got the money to do this, but they blew up huge photos. There was about 5 photographers involved. And all over town, it became like a biking tour, and you'd go around the corner and see your photo, huge on the side of a building. It was pretty awesome. So I'm hoping to segue into doing more larger outdoor exhibitions as a result of this. It's for scale. Sponsored by Polar. So meanwhile, while I was crabbing and I was shooting these photos, Deadliest Catch showed up. I wasn't sure if that was going to kind of spoil my project that I was doing and commercialize it or whatnot. So I just kept doing my thing, and I ended up licensing a few images to them and actually shooting for them. So in the end, the money I made from that helped me with my own project. And I ended up shooting the captains in this Times Square billboard. And sort of piecemealed this together in Seattle with models, actually. This is like my own rain gear, and we had models recreating this shot. This is for UK, Deadliest Catch. And I started shooting a lot of editorial work. So the great thing about I only really show on my website what I want to be doing most of all. I'm not really compromising and showing photos that I think I can make money with and whatnot. I've always just kind of showed my passion, which is traveling and adventure and the Arctic and fishing and whatnot. So by doing that, I've ended up getting hired by, I spent a week in Barrow, Alaska, shooting a story about oil drilling in the Arctic. I just spent 10 days in Micronesia for Outside Magazine shooting Bikini Atoll, which is the nuclear test site for the US military. This is Fortune magazine. And then I've gotten hired also to shoot different fisheries that I wouldn't normally have gone on. This is pollock trawling in Alaska and gill netting in Mexico. Diving in Greece for Outside. And then even somehow translated into celebrity photography, which has only happened once actually, but. And this is about as polished as it gets for me. And I don't even show this kind of work normally on my website, but this is quite a big production with 25 people on the set, and animal trainers, and we had like 4 different cats that looked exactly the same, and a couple of basset hounds, and then like that cat is like a Photoshop of 8 different cats. So, and then some pretty random stuff. I had this great campaign for Colombia that sent me around quite a lot. So the final series here, and this is sort of what I've been working on for the last 4 years, and it just showed at Charles Hartman Gallery. This is my own salmon fishing experience that I'm doing right now. I own 2 permits and run 2 skiffs up there. At a place called Graveyard Point, Alaska. We live in an abandoned cannery. There's about 130 people that show up there. It's really remote. And we basically just show up. There's no electricity, running water. We kind of fix things up and build our own little kitchens and build our own little quarters for about 4 or 5 weeks. It's called Graveyard Point because there's a graveyard that's actually been falling into the sea for the last 50 years or so. And every year you show up and there's more human remains and caskets kind of exposed. And one year we showed up, there was a raven nest kind of residence outside our cabin, keeping everyone awake all night. And these are the type of skiffs we're running. Just little tiny. The reason I love this type of fishing because there's no noise, there's no hydraulics. It's all kind of the romantic idea of fishing where you're pulling nets by hand and just bringing in fish like crazy. They're so plentiful in Bristol Bay. It's amazing. And then off time, we'd be out exploring nearby abandoned canneries. It's just a huge adventure being out there. Came across this bear who had been, unfortunately, wounded and had crawled out in the mud and didn't have long to live. Most of the characters out there have guns to protect from the bears. And there's actually quite a lot of women fishermen. I have one working for me who's probably the toughest deckhand I've ever had or worked with. So this series is really about the people out there. It's a melting pot of all these different people from the lower 48, all walks of life kind of converging and living. It's like a real world in a fishing camp in the middle of nowhere. So I'm trying to fight off the reality TV companies that are converging on it. This is Billy, my deckhand right now. And this is Ben. You can meet him. He's in the audience here, actually. And this is the last slide from this series. And I just wanted, the whole moral of the story is really the old saying, just follow your passion, and it'll usually work out. And I feel like that's what I've been trying to do my whole life. And I'm really fortunate for having the opportunities I've had. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks very much.